All right, and we're live. So welcome everybody, and welcome especially to the panelists we have today. And welcome on the RIF Decentralized Storage panel. Today we have an amazing lineup of panelists, all experts in the field of decentralized storage. So it's no wonder that in this panel we focus on the decentralized storage landscape in general, where we are standing, who are the users, what are the challenges to overcome, but also to explore the individual solutions, what each of you brings to the table, and we are going to identify the relative differences and similarities between your projects. So, well, first of all, let me introduce each of you. We have with us Dani. Hi, Dani. You're in the car right now.
Hello.
Nagy is a researcher and one of the co-founders of the Swarm projects. Then we have Vojtěch with the beautiful green screen behind him. Vojtěch is the product owner and visionary of RIF Storage. Then we have David. David is the CEO of Saya, and Saswata, the CEO of Zero Chain.
Yeah.
So my name is Rinke Hendriksen. I'm most of the time economical researcher and product owner, working both for RIF Storage and Swarm on, of course, decentralized storage. And today I'll be moderating this panel. So the panel is hosted by RIF because we believe that rather than just sharing our own perspective, it's better to invite experts and basically learn from them. So to learn what you're up to, what are you working on, and which challenges you overcame. So let's start. And I would actually like to kick off this panel by asking you maybe on an anecdote, a personal story on when you started to work on decentralized storage, and maybe there was a time that you were talking with a friend, or there was a personal frustration you had with something. Dani, let's start with you. When did you decide to start Swarm, and was there something particular happening? And you are muted. I will unmute you. Yeah, okay, now you're unmuted.
Thank you. So for me, decentralized storage started even before Swarm, but Swarm started in November, well, fall 2014. So shortly before the Genesis block of Ethereum. But I had a long-standing interest in file sharing and censorship-resistant publication and so on. So that goes back about 5-6 years before that. And Swarm seemed to be when two of my interests came together, which was cryptocurrency and decentralized storage. So I found that there's this project at the nexus of these two technologies, which I both consider freedom-enhancing technologies, which are adding something that is in short supply in our world. So this was an invitation from a friend of mine, Victor Tron, who is still the leader of the Swarm project. I met him in a libertarian discussion group. And since it was known from that group that I'm interested in these two things, like I wrote lots of things about censorship-resistant communication and file sharing and cryptocurrencies, then he decided that I might be the right person for the job. So he told me to apply. I applied. I got through the interview of one of the board members of Ethereum back then. So I started working on Ethereum as part of the Geth team. Geth is the Go Ethereum node, and Swarm back then was considered to be an inseparable, integral part of Ethereum. So there was this talk about the Holy Trinity of Ethereum, which is the blockchain, which is ETH, the communication protocol, which is Whisper, and the storage layer, which was Swarm. And so back then it was thought that it will be part of a whole. However, so later, basically, we found that decentralized storage, the way we want it to happen, is a big enough project that keeping up with the release schedule of the Go Ethereum client was impractical. So first we got our project, our code, our client separated. So first Swarm became a independent client accessing the Ethereum node over some internal RPC protocol. Later, it also turned out that it's a big enough project to warrant a larger development team, so larger than me and Victor. So new people started coming on board, and basically we formed our own team, which was by now separate from the Geth team, from which it kind of separated. So we started off as part of the Geth team, but later we became a separate team and a separate project funded by Ethereum Foundation. And very, very recently, we finished the so-called graduation process when Swarm becomes a project of its own, still funded partially as on a grant basis by Ethereum Foundation, but it's now independent and we are basically an organization of our own. So this is the story of the organization. The project itself also evolved. So originally the goal was to store static data of dApps, distributed Web3 applications, and maybe also provide a scaling solution for the blockchain, because originally, so this goes back all the way back to Bitcoin, that the idea was that full nodes store the entire blockchain. So each node in the network stores everything, which is very redundant, but also very expensive. And so one path towards scalability was that everything is stored by more than one node, but not every node stores everything. And this is kind of how Swarm works. So this is still let's say, not our first priority, because there are other bottlenecks in scaling Ethereum. But for example, hosting distributed apps, web content on Swarm is a very high priority. Yep. And actually, this is kind of the central pillar of what is called the Web3, because so back in the day, in the mid-90s. Okay. Yeah. I can talk about this forever, so sorry. Please stop me.
Cool. No mean to interrupt you, but yeah, we should also give, of course. For example, David the possibility to share the start of the Saya project.
Hi. Yes. Glad to do that. So, yeah, I think Saya really started conceptually in 2013 when things were moving a lot more to the cloud. So this is when devices like Android and the iPhone were really starting to integrate the cloud as a more core part of the user experience rather than just something that some people used. And I was really passionate about data, and I had this question like, why am I being forced to move a lot of my data onto a platform that someone else controls, and why am I giving it over? And so I was a big fan of Bitcoin at the time, and I was like, Bitcoin made it possible to have money with no centrally controlled bank. So can you use the same technology behind Bitcoin to make a cloud with no central cloud provider? And so that was the question me and my co-founder were batting around in 2013. We launched the Saya project in 2014 in May. And yeah, I guess that's we've just been growing from there. So we formed a company. We did what back then was called an IPO. This is the pre-ICO days, where we just called it IPOs. We got slapped by the SEC for doing that. It was not chill, but we're cool now with the SEC, and we've kept going. Obviously, done several rounds of funding since then. Today, our team's about 10 people. And we recently launched something called Skynet, which I think we'll be able to get to later. But basically, at this point, I feel like we've been able to fulfill the vision of a cloud that is an integrated experience that no one controls.
And at that time that you started, what's the name of your co-founder, by the way?
Luke Champagne.
All right. So at the time that you were discussing this with Luke, could you imagine that one time Saya, I don't know if you had the name already, but that it would become as big as it is right now?
Definitely, we imagined it. It was, I think the most surreal moment was when the market cap hit $3 billion and the whole company was 3 engineers. It's just a very surreal moment for all of us. We're like working, out of our house. We don't even have an office at that point. Things have cooled. This is 2017, of course. Things have cooled off a little bit, but yeah, we back then it was called Bytecoin in 2013, and I think we've always had ambitions to be the next Google or the next Amazon, but it's still pretty incredible as it happens.
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that story. Vojtěch, what about you? Since when are you working on decentralized storage, and what was really the moment that you had the click, like that's what we need to have?
Yeah, sure. So as Danny said, I was at first a user of decentralized storage, actually in the form of DC++. Maybe some of you know. We were using it to during university to actually share recordings of the lectures. So that was quite a useful technology back then. And then I slowly, started to get into the whole blockchain, Ethereum first, Bitcoin as well, and then during my work at CERN, I've also touched a little bit of cloud storage and how they store data there in the grid system. Basically, that's some sort of decentralized storage there as well, where bytes of data are stored across universities or around the world.
All right.
So soon after, I've joined IOVLabs to work on the project of decentralized storage, and the aim, the vision here is for RIF or RSK infrastructure framework to really be a one-stop shop for any infrastructure needs that you may have in the decentralized world.
So RIF storage is part of IOVLabs, right? Of RIF. So how does storage fit in the vision of RIF as a whole?
So storage, of course, is one of the crucial components that you need to have if you want to build a truly decentralized system. So sooner or later, whenever you have a dApps, let's say you have a DeFi dApp, you will run into a problem. So how do I actually store the user interface for it? How do I store user data? And the vision of RIF storage is to provide answer to this. So RIF storage is actually a protocol that is allowing developers to use a third-party storage, decentralized storage solutions, and seamlessly integrate and be able to move from one system to another as it suits their needs.
Cool. Well, very interesting. Thanks for that. So Saswata, did you also got interested in decentralized storage just from your own interest, or was it related to blockchain? You're muted if you're talking. Should unmute you. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 2017 is when we started. I had a previous startup. It was in the IoT sensors, and we were sending data to the cloud. And I thought, well, and this is for the ag tech industry, which, farmers, they don't know technology and their only income is food. And this would be a very nice way to have an additional source of income if they provide sensor data. And there's also, carbon credits they get. So there are a lot of aspects of things that they could do if they can send this data to the cloud and be usable by somebody else, and they can market it and additional revenue they can generate. But there wasn't a blockchain around that was fast enough for that kind of activity and at an enterprise scale. And I come from an enterprise background. I mean, all my life had been with enterprise. So when Ethereum, we looked at Ethereum in 2017, we wanted to use it, so we couldn't. So we started from scratch. We looked at Saya, by the way, as well. And I think at that point, you were still early on. So we said, okay, let's start with a clean slate and develop something from ground up. And so we did the blockchain layer. So I met up with a professor at San Jose State. And this professor was interesting. He went to Switzerland and studied cryptocurrency. This was in 2013. And he knew about all these aspects because there were very few people in the West Coast that knew about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So we really hit it off. And he was my co-founder, and we started this project in 2017. We raised quite a bit of money through pre-sale. We didn't have an ICO. And then we basically hunkered down and worked on the project. There was a lot of work to be done. We worked on the blockchain, which was very difficult. We took the Definity protocol and modified it to what we wanted to be a little bit faster and for enterprise need. And then developed storage protocol from scratch. This is something that Tom basically innovated on. He's a security expert. And he really, invented that protocol. And basically, we did, we have been working for last 3 years. There has been some changes, dips because of the dips in the crypto market, but we have been plugging on. And we have focused now more on the GDPR and CCPA market for the enterprise. We think there's a sweet spot which we can address very effectively. And of course, the crypto market, as all these projects come along, which is a good thing to have, they need somewhere to store the data. They could store it on AWS, but we offer a total decentralized, obviously, solution with transparency and all the benefits of decentralization. But also, we actually can do better performance than AWS. So that's something we can showcase. And also the aspects of privacy, right? Because I think most startups now, whether you're a crypto startup or a regular startup, have to worry about GDPR and CCP compliance anyway. So why not have it set up from the beginning?
Cool, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So that's actually a very nice bridge to the next question, which I would like to ask, because what I'm hearing from you is that this is specifically geared towards enterprise development, whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, David, and also Danny and Vojtěch, I have the idea that from your stories, your project mostly aiming to the consumer market, or at least also the consumer market. This is generally something which I think if somebody comes into, okay, I want to use decentralized storage, and goes on Google and going to figure out what is out there, and most likely Swarm will pop up, Saya, I think all of those projects here will pop up, some others as well. But can we, in this panel right now, maybe collaboratively figure out what are the differences, at least between these projects here, maybe even analyzing other projects which are around, and how would you give such a person which is new, wants to use decentralized storage, how would you give him advice on what projects to use and which one maybe not. Please, anybody can start.
So if I may, I think they should try them all. I think they'll have probably benefits. It depends really on the use case. Like if you're doing very short or small data, maybe that's not, we are probably not the platform of choice, because our block size is 64 KB. So if you're doing like chats and stuff, maybe use something else. But if you're using for a very fast, like we have a ZeroBox app, which is a consumer, it's like a Dropbox app, but it's a personal cloud. So you can say it's a consumer oriented, but it's really geared toward consumer teams in enterprises or businesses. And that needs to be fast. And so that, if for that kind of application, we think we are a very good platform. If developers want configuration, then we give them a lot of choice. We have SLA built into the protocol. So I think they should try out everything out there. I think there are a couple of other projects that are not on the panel here, like Filecoin and StorageJ. They should try that out as well.
Yeah. So, David, do you agree? Try them all out, or would you do a different strategy?
I'm certainly not against experimentation. I can say that on our end, our big focus is more on Web3, and also on extreme ease of use. So we've spent a lot of time, especially with the release of Skynet, really refining the onboarding experience for users. So you can upload your first file. If you've never heard of Skynet before, you can upload your first file in about 15 seconds. You go to the website and you click the upload button, and it's good. And we have, for developers, we have a SDK that, and if you're using, say, Python, it's import Skynet.upload, and you've just integrated Skynet into your application. So it's 2 lines of code. Our most prominent library would be JavaScript. So really, Skynet's aimed at web app development. And so in the same way that you can just go to sci-sky.net and start uploading files, sky.net/HNS/Wakio, and that's a blogging platform that's hosted entirely on Skynet. So I think our focus is really on, I would say, Web3, and giving this decentralized platform for people to make the next Medium, the next YouTube, the next Twitter. And I think, for us, it's all about just making it as painless as possible for users and developers to onboard.
All right. So you say that actually the most distinctive feature for the user is probably the usability, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dani or Vojtěch, do you think there are different features which you should take care of when choosing such a platform?
So I believe that decentralized storage is actually a fairly big space, and there's a lot of room for specialization. Because if you think about it, storing data is not enough. It also needs to be delivered. For example, if there's some piece of popular content that lots of users want to access at the same time, then you're facing a problem which is very different from the problem of storing. Also, even storing as such, if you're storing, again, something that everybody wants to download, and whether it's a long video file that anybody can wait for hours to download it and then play it, is very different from whether you want to store like static web content and little, PNG files, which are the decorations of web pages, where you just want to be as fast as possible. Or if you're storing somebody's encrypted backup, which nobody except the uploader ever wants to download, and probably even the uploader doesn't want to download, they just need it to be there in case, something major happens. So these are all very different aspects of storage. So storage is really a very, very large design space. And I believe that all projects can have a part of that pie. And I think that at this early stage, when there's no go-to solution, what every project does, certainly all of the present ones and the ones already mentioned do that they all focus on something to be really good at, but they also develop all the other parts because we cannot afford to critically depend on other projects that are still in their infancy for, just in order not to fail together. But I believe my vision of the future is that hopefully many of our projects will succeed, and there will be some sort of specialization. And there will also be some sort of compatibility. So, for example, I can very well imagine that Swarm will be more about censorship-resistant storage and incentivization of storage as such, and content delivery, search, lookup, indexing, databases. All these things will be accessed through some other projects, but in the backend, maybe the data itself will be stored in Swarm, or one project can use the other one as a archival solution. So I think that now we're all in our infancy, and we all kind of try to do everything. But eventually, I believe that there will be more specialization and more differentiation in this space. And I think I will second the speakers before me that experimentation and trying everything out is definitely the way to go for new projects and startups. And I would advise against relying critically on any one of these solutions that we're developing just because there's some other one might be a better solution, or the timelines of these problems might not be aligned with your startup's timeline. And I think that because in this space, in the decentralized space, open source is the way of doing things, I think that migration is not as big a deal as in the centralized world. I think that's cool. That concludes what I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, I can only second everything that you guys have said. Maybe one word of advice would be to first understand what your solution really needs. Does it need to be heavily decentralized, heavily censorship resistant? If so, then maybe I would go towards a protocol like Swarm. Does it have a big blobs of data that you want to serve fast? Maybe then SIA, IPFS, those are your options. Or is it something where you want to archive this data for a long time? Then you can start thinking of protocols like RWave that are doing exactly that.
Yeah. But this, what you just say, Vojtěch, I think is very valuable because I can imagine that just somebody just joining, a ton of projects out there, and they all seemingly do the same. And I think what you just say there, that's good. Is there any place where you learned this, or is this just experience speaking?
Yeah, so this comes down from the experimentation, because I have a little bit of an advantage because when building the RIF storage protocol, the idea is that we work with third-party storage solutions, and we unify the interface, and we make it very easy for people to hop from one storage solution to another based on their needs.
Yeah. So with RIF storage, you can actually try out the different projects out there.
Yeah, right now you can try the Swarm and you can try the IPFS solution, but we're of course looking at what to do next.
Okay, so generally, of course, figuring out what you need is very important, and I think this also ties into figuring out whether you need decentralized storage at all, right? Because it's quite a different beast than storing your data at a centralized provider. So Vojtěch, if you, I don't know, talk with a prospective user of RIF storage, what do you think, when would they be generally interested in using decentralized storage compared to centralized storage? And what are the relative merits and differences with decentralized storage compared to the centralized?
Yeah, I think this comes down a lot into the mindset of the project.
Mm-hmm.
So if your project is a project that is trying to tackle a privacy and users owning their data and their information, then probably you're going for a decentralized storage. Or if your project is something that, for example, is a DeFi tool where you want to achieve something like just upload it once and then, you don't have to touch that ever again, and it stays in the network as long as it's popular. All of that is something that you may want to use decentralized storage for.
Cool. Does somebody have a different view on that? When would you be using decentralized storage compared to centralized storage? And what would be the user experience be? How would it be different?
Well, I think that the main issue here is control. That if you're using a centralized provider, then you are entrusting them and making them the gatekeeper of your data. And in that sense, there's a third party with its own interests and its own business model between the producers of that data and the consumers of that data. Whereas in a decentralized solution, there's a peer-to-peer network which consists of cooperating and competing nodes, which kind of make that infrastructure layer neutral. And if you are, so it allows the producers of content to reach the consumers of content directly without, even though technically there are intermediaries, but they're no longer gatekeepers. So in a decentralized solution, if there's insufficient storage capacity and you need more, you always have the option to add it yourself. And also, if some nodes decide to exercise filtering or censorship or anything like that, then other nodes might disagree and see it as an opportunity to step in and provide that storage regardless. So I think that it's the disintermediation which is the key advantage of decentralization, and this is why we have blockchains for financial transactions, and this is why we're developing decentralized storage solutions.
All right. So, David, disintermediation, do you agree with that? And if you agree with that, in your opinion, does this come at a cost, or is it free lunch?
Yeah. So I would say always decentralize. When you use centralized technology, you essentially give someone else the power to take something away from you. And I think that much of corporate America is built around the idea of getting consumers, whether it's enterprise level or consumer level, just getting others to depend on your product, and then leveraging the fact that they can't live without your product to extract value from them. And this is often called vendor lock-in or building a moat. And honestly, I think it's just a very distasteful way for a country to be built. When you decentralize, you give the power to yourself, and it means that your technology costs exactly as much as it's supposed to. It can't be, there's no company standing over you, say like Amazon, or maybe more relevant, Facebook saying that, oh, if you don't agree to these updated terms of service, you can't talk to your friends anymore. And I think that in storage, it's just as important as well. In terms of free lunch, I can tell you, we feel the cost in the sense that it's much more challenging to build a decentralized storage platform than it is to build a centralized platform. If we had done this all with centralized servers, I think we'd have gotten as far as we are today in like 6 months. It's been 6 years, I guess we're coming up on 7 years. I feel the cost there, but in the end, I think once all the work is done, consumers should actually have a better experience. It should be lower cost. It should be competitive, in terms of speeds. And then I think it can be global in a way that centralized technology cannot. For example, Android does not integrate with iCloud. iCloud does not play nice with other clouds. Whereas if everything is on the decentralized web, it's all open, and you can have every platform kind of share the same data space. And so I think that is a huge win for consumers. So I do think it's a tough road that we have to go down. But I think that once we go down it, we end up in just across the board a much better place as a society.
All right, thank you. Saswata, what is your opinion on this question? And you're muted. I'll unmute you. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of second what David and Daniel said. It's obviously you want to give users the control, the ownership of data. And one of the things now the corporations are kind of forced to do is because of these regulations, GDPR, and we're saying, hey, GDPR, you can use there are some privacy tools out there, but that doesn't go and solve your problem. Why don't you lead this and use a decentralized storage platform and provide ownership back to the user? Then you don't have liability. So there are advantages for a corporation to actually go the decentralized route and absolve liability. You can shift the liability of owning the data. Like if there's a data breach, right, who's liable? Usually is the corporation. Of course, they blame the processor, which is the AWS cloud. So there's a concept of the controller, which is the corporation, and then the processor where their data resides, like AWS. So you could blame either party or both parties. So in this case, what we're doing is basically we're solving that problem, and we're saying, look, all the data activities are going to be recorded on the blockchain. So you can actually, and you shift the liability, you basically shift the ownership back to the user, you give the data back to the user. And we can provide this platform that can integrate with your existing system. I mean, that's the holy grail idea of doing this. So we're working on that aspect for the enterprises. But we also have an app to kind of showcase our technology and kind of get people excited about is what we call ZeroBox. It is like Dropbox. In a Dropbox, basically all the data is on AWS, right? And they can see your data. So in this case, basically you can encrypt, you can private share. We also have SLAs. We have challenges that are happening with the blockchain to challenge your data on a continual basis. Something that no one does. Dropbox doesn't do it. They don't store your data privately. They don't do private sharing. So this is something that we offer to the users, and the usability is as good, if not better, than Dropbox because the performance, the speed, all of that can match what we offer. So we feel that this application on top of our platform is a good way to showcase what a decentralized storage can do for you. And once people see that, I think they will. It's like water. If you or internet, right? If you didn't have internet 20 years ago, you didn't know what it was, but now you can't live without it. So I think people will converge toward decentralized storage. That would be the norm.
All right. So now let's try to put ourselves in the board seat of the CEO of Google. We are 5 years ahead. all of those platforms launch, get incredible user adoption. What does the CEO of Google do, and do you think that the projects which are, well, starting right now, do you still have a competitive edge against those? Anybody can answer.
Well, yeah, if I may, I mean, I think we don't have to necessarily compete with AWS or Google at the beginning. We just provide an alternative platform. If we become successful, that's great. Google and Amazon takes notice, and they can join in. It's not like that they would, I mean, they would have to change their business model. They would have to basically be part of the minor infrastructure, and they can have an edge. They can say, look, we have a data center, and we're joining the network, the decentralized network. So because we don't prevent anybody from joining the network, they can also participate down the road. And today their value add is, yes, it is infrastructure, but really is their software. Now they're putting a lot more emphasis on their software. And if you look at AWS, unfortunately, they kind of copy software and then sell it, copy open source software and then sell it as their own service. And that is how they're building their service layer. Which is why you go to AWS, because it gets so many services that comes bundled with it. So I'm thinking that they will probably join the network in 5 years, right? Google, Amazon, and they will provide the service layer. Maybe it's a retrieval service, data retrieval service, CDN service, like what Daniel was saying. So, or what David was saying, maybe there is elements that they would provide that would allow shifting of the ownership back to the user.
Cool. That's interesting. I think also brings me to the next topic, which is economics and business model. David, as you already touched this one earlier, contrasting the business model of centralized storage providers with decentralized ones. You just mentioned what is the business model of centralized storage provider, being vendor lock-in and making you dependent on it. But what do you see is the business model? I mean, let's say for Saya first, and then the rest can also answer what are the business model for their respective products.
Yeah, so I think the business model is essentially to charge money to users, which I think is the healthiest way to extract value. We believe that markets work best and an economy is healthiest when value is extracted as close to possible to the point the value is added. And to give kind of an example of where this doesn't happen and where it doesn't work well, I'll take Google search, where value is added by Google feeding you good search results. Value is extracted by Google propping up some results over others or displaying ads as top-level search results. And so essentially, Google is extracting value by making your life worse. They're crippling their own product in order to make revenue. And so we think that a much better way to do it is, as soon as a user, say, downloads an image or likes an image, that's the point where we charge the user for that image, for that bandwidth, or if a user says I'm going to pin this file, we charge the user at that point. And I think we take a lot of inspiration from platforms like Steam, Spotify, Netflix, and even models like utilities like natural gas and electricity, where all of these are things that I think Netflix is kind of the biggest winner in the regards to something users never used to pay for. Internet piracy and movie piracy was a huge issue for the giants, and Netflix was like, this isn't a money problem. Users don't mind paying $15 a month for movies. It's a user problem. We just haven't made it easy enough. And so Netflix made it really easy for users to get what they want, and then they put this $15 a month fee in there. But it's in the background, right? Once you set up the account, you're not thinking about paying every time you watch a movie. It's just part of the service. And so,
interesting. Yeah.
We see Skynet being set up like that, where users onboard once, they provide their card information, and then similar to like a cell phone bill, if you get a giant bill at the end of the month, it's kind of your fault. But otherwise, you just don't have to worry about it. You use it like normal, and you will get paid you'll get charged an appropriate and reasonable amount for your usage on the network. So that's how we're thinking about the economics of our ecosystem.
Right, very interesting. So you do believe that it is possible to actually make users get to pay for consuming the services on the internet, which they think right now is for free. Taking inspiration from how Netflix did it, which I agree is definitely a good example.
Yep.
All right. Somebody wants to react on that or have a different view here?
Yes, I think I would like to second that and add a little bit on the other side of the equation that in decentralized solutions, of course, even though it's a smaller but still substantial group of users which are providers of this service. So we're talking about a two-sided market when there are
Oh, Danny, you're breaking up right now.
Some providers of various. So the challenge of any economic model that we're trying to build on top of this is to make sure that users have this experience of, paying what they actually use and getting the value that they paid for. And on the other hand, for the providers of these various services to get compensated for their efforts by providing, storage capacity, bandwidth, or content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that creating a market where providers and consumers of various services can meet and, discover the price of all these things, and to encourage, filling the gaps if there's a shortage of certain capacity, that's the real challenge of building the economic model.
All right, thanks for that.
I can only agree, and I can offer one more anecdote or one more comparison. If we look in past in services like SMS, where you were charged for actually sending every message into this, by the operator, I see storage as kind of becoming that, because right now you can use any other system and solution like, I don't know, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever. But as David said, there is some value extraction. You are sharing your data, or you are sharing the content of whatever you're sending, or in some other ways you are being utilized. So the idea of decentralized storage being an option where you can now actually choose whether you want to pay for storing of your data and have some sort of guarantees or security come with that, or whether you want it to be free but with some caveats when it comes to privacy, for example.
All right, that's very valid additional comments. So Saswata, talking about economics, how, in your opinion, does the blockchain of Zero Chain, how is it tied into your system from the economic perspective? And why do we need it? You mute it again. Up, unmute.
Okay, so yeah, actually, yes, the economics is that, so we have an ecosystem where the miners basically are getting paid by the blockchain. So as they receive the write requests, the read requests, we have something called markers. They send it to the blockchain, and that's how they're getting paid. So we have a pretty interesting protocol in that sense. It's all done in parallel. So the user experience is very fast, have a very fast downloads and uploads because it's done in parallel. But they get, the blockchain basically pays them the blockchain challenges them whether they're storing the data, and only if they pass the challenge, they get paid. And then if somebody were to read the data, they get paid after they get the read markers. So so the other incentive we have for the miners is that they can, they're decoupled. So their operational wallet is decoupled from the delegation wallet, and they can form a pool. So for instance, if I'm a miner, we are trying to Uberize, basically Uberize service providers. There's about 50,000 managed storage service providers in the US alone. Globally, there's probably 4 times that. So there's a lot of service providers providing storage for small businesses. There are about 20 million businesses, small businesses in the world. And who provides some storage? It's basically IT managers, the IT consultants, and they're called MSPs, managed storage providers or managed service providers. And they all have access to the data centers. So they can build equipment, and what we're offering is basically an off-the-shelf equipment that they can get and put it in the data center and basically make as much money or more than if you were to invest in Uber and drive the car around. So think of it as an Uberization of IT consultants or managed storage providers providing storage. Now, on the consumer side, what we're doing is similar to what David said with their Skynet. We are providing ZeroBox, which is essentially what Dropbox is. It's a monthly charge on the card. They have the same user experience as what they have today, probably better, but they have total control of their data. They have transparency. They can view the data on the blockchain and so forth. So, so our ecosystem is basically kind of right now. We have both the app side as well as the consumption side, as well as the incentive for miners to come in and join our network and provide storage, because we lowered the bar to entry because we are using off-the-shelf hardware, number one. Number two is we are allowing them to form a pool and get others to stake on their platform and charge a service. So they could actually, especially if I'm an MSP, I already have a data center. I already have space in my cabinet. I already may have a server. Okay, so it's essentially zero cost for me to put a server in the data center that I already am using to provide service for my customer and participate in the network and, you know, get income, right? In the form of tokens, fungible tokens. So we believe that's a very strong motivation for anybody to play on our network. And on the consumer side, we're making it very easy to onboard them because it's just a credit card like anything else.
So you're making use of the fact that there is perhaps underutilized capacity already out there, which can be utilized on your platform, right? Yeah,
and it's very easy because they already have their server, they have a cabinet, they're serving their existing customers, they can onboard it. The customers doesn't even have to know where the storage is, and they don't ask, where is the storage? Sometimes they'll ask, hey, where are you keeping my storage? Is it AWS or Azure, or where is it? They don't really have to ask.
All right. So we just got the reminder that we are only 10 minutes to go. So I would like to introduce the final topic, which is more law related. So I'm not a lawyer myself, but anyways, I do think that this topic is very interesting, in particular for decentralized storage, where I believe that it is a bit of a gray area thinking about law, especially when maybe content is hosted on those platforms, which might be illegal, or the platform otherwise enables illegal activity. So how do you guys cope with that? Should we cope with it or not at all?
So I guess I'm still on. So I guess from our perspective, we want to be neutral because we want to be censor resistance. We delegate that responsibility to the app. So if, for instance, we are a platform, we also have an app called ZeroBox, right, as I mentioned. So on the app side, what we will probably do is that if there's a content that's out in the public, so you could encrypt your content and private share, which is fine. We won't touch it. But if it's a public content that you haven't encrypted, that anybody can see it, and it's illegal content or bad content or content that should have been protected, plagiarized content, then we might take action. So that's where we kind of draw the line between the application and the platform, because the platform should stay neutral and be uncensored, and anybody should be permissionless.
Right. Maybe David or Vojtěch can chime in. Danny just lost.
Yeah, I can speak to our approach to the legal question, which so the first thing that we do just with regards to GDPR is we give the uploader full control over which nodes the data ends up on. So if you just let it go, it will pick nodes on its own. It'll pick a combination of high-speed nodes and geographically diverse nodes to give the biggest reliability possible. But if you have certain restrictions on where that data is allowed to be, then you can pass in a allow list of nodes and ensure that only specific nodes end up receiving the data. So that's something that if you're putting content out there, it's very much in your control to ensure that your data stays in compliant regions. Now, where it gets dicey is what other people do, because it's an open, censorship-resistant platform. So if someone uploads something, they put it where it's not supposed to be. At the platform level, there's not a ton of control. We can't step in and kick it off the network. That's just not how it works. But what we can do is all the access points, which we call portals, have their own control and their own ability to block files, block applications, and block data. And so basically we've kind of set up a coalition between all of the access points, and they can, if there's content, if they're getting letters, they can share with each other the block lists that they use and kind of control data that way. Now, of course, anyone can run a node. Becoming a portal and becoming an access point is fairly simple. A typical consumer laptop, pretty much as long as it has an SSD, is all you need. And then you will get full access to the network. So you can always circumvent this coalition just by running a node yourself and not participating in the coalition. But I think that's kind of just the line you have to draw. The other thing that I will say is our individual storage providers also have the ability to drop content. They pay a penalty for dropping the content, so it's not free for them to do that. But if it's a significant legal risk, storage providers can always choose to reject content not stored in the first place, or if they find out later that it's problematic content, they can choose to drop that content. And then again, if you want censorship resistance, you just have to find storage providers that are not dropping content and are choosing to assume the legal risk of not dropping that content, which again is something we don't facilitate, but the network certainly enables.
Cool. So I think that's a very sensible approach. Just to summarize, you're basically saying we cannot block list anything on the layer of the network. However, the centralized access point to that network maybe can collaborate and put censor contents, but we should not aim to censor anything on the network layer, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Please, Danny, go.
So I believe that one of the reasons why we have this explosion of freedom-enabling technologies on the internet is the neutrality of the internet. And I can tell from experience that in jurisdictions where the internet connection is filtered for one reason or another, the user experience of using the internet as such is much worse. And I believe that if we read the original idealistic visions of what the internet was supposed to be, we see this decentralized and censorship-resistant capability, even going back as far as the original DARPANET project, where the intention was to provide a network which would remain operational in the event of a thermonuclear war. So I think that this resilience and being able to communicate whatever you want in an extremely hostile environment is kind of baked into the DNA of the internet itself. And I think that these decentralized storage solutions are a very, very natural continuation and really an embodiment of that vision. Mm-hmm. So I think that really, the problem that we don't want certain information to be, to proliferate, the solution to that is not censorship. The solution to that is, good counter arguments, better classification, better tagging, better search. But I don't think that anybody should be in charge of what people can say to each other. And, storage is really just communication across time. So instant communication covers distances in space, whereas storage covers distances in time. And I think that the freedom to say whatever you want to anybody is really essential to the development of civilization itself and the internet in particular. So I do believe that the right way of fighting the kind of things that people usually want to fight is not the network layer and not the infrastructure.
All right, good. Vojtěch, something to add to that?
Well, I can just summarize that from the experience of other storage networks as well, and I think this is a sensible approach. It's almost never censored or limited on the network side. It's basically the equivalent of trying to block packets in your TCP/IP router. So any censorship, any additional restrictions are usually blocked on the level of nodes on gateways where you are retrieving the information, and there you, similar to how SIA has, you have some lists to which you can subscribe, and you can usually decide what you are willing to forward and what you are not willing to forward.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, guys, last minute is in. I would like to end it by asking each of you a prediction for your particular project, where you think your project will be in 5 years' time, and the decentralized storage industry as a whole. Vojtěch, kick it off.
Okay, so I believe that talking about RIF storage, that there's a bright future for RIF storage, as it's somewhat of an agnostic system to the storage solution. So if any storage solution succeeds, then I believe RIF storage solution succeeds. And I think in 5 years' time, we will have a very significant portion of users of the global internet accessing it, especially given that the project is very Latin America focused, where technologies such as decentralized storage are high in demand and very needed.
Cool. Right. And David?
Yeah, it's fun to think about. I've been really excited to see where Skynet has started, and I think 5 years from now, we're gonna have a fully decentralized Twitter. We're gonna have the beginnings of a fully decentralized YouTube. I don't think 5 years is nearly enough time to displace YouTube. I do think it's enough time to displace Twitter. I think it's enough time to displace Medium. And then we'll be, at that point, we'll be on our way to displacing YouTube, and shortly after, even Netflix. So that's my.
Thanks for that, Saswata. Oh, you're muted. Yeah, please go.
Okay. So yeah, so in 5 years, I'm hoping that we'll be a significant competitor to Dropbox or Box, these two solutions that are number 1 and 2. And I'm hoping that we'll be the de facto platform of choice for enterprises for GDPR and CCPA compliance, because I think 5 years, every company would have to comply. So those are the 2 things that I would like to see. And then the third thing is I want to do something about the censorship and illegality of storage of data, basically. And for that, we have a governance protocol that we want to basically use. I mean, there's a lot of fake news out there. I think David mentioned in terms of Twitter being a platform where they control everything. Right? What is determined as fake news, what is determined as real news. So they are the determining factor. We want to take that out in terms of a governance protocol, and we've been working on that. We have written papers on it. Professor submitted this at the Marble conference. It was very well received. So we're going to implement that protocol, and the part of the governance protocol was really to have on-chain governance as part of the protocol, decentralized governance, but it can be used for identifying if data is fake or not, and whether this data should be deleted. Cool. So that's something that we will tinker on and hopefully lead on that.
So that's a real practical use case which you would like to solve with the decentralized storage in the upcoming 5 years.
Absolutely. And we can be solution provider to David's Twitter, Skynet.
Cool. Danny, what about you? 5 years from now, where will Swarm be and decentralized storage in general?
So I believe that in order to consider Swarm a success in 5 years, it would already need to store a very significant part of what I would call the permanent record of human knowledge. So I would expect data which are currently stored by Wikipedia, OpenStreetMap, or the blockchain, and things like that. So data of public interest will be stored on Swarm. And I think that also, very importantly, unlike all these projects that I mentioned, these Swarm-based solutions will never have to grapple with the problem of deciding on some official truth. So if there are some contentious issues, then users will be able to find all the relevant opinions that exist in the world about these things. So I think that's what censorship resistance of Swarm should be able to provide. I would also imagine that the commons of humanity, such as movies that became, public domain, music, books, and so on, will also move to Swarm. And Swarm will become this, indestructible and fireproof library of Alexandria.
Cool. Thanks for that, Danny. And with that, I would like to end the panel. First of all, thank all the panelists, Vojtěch, David, Saswata, and Danny. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for joining. To briefly summarize, we started the panel with anecdotes on the start of each of the projects. Then we went into comparing the decentralized storage solutions among themselves, whether they differ and how would you advise a user to use what. We spoke about how decentralized storage compares with centralized storage, and we ended up with a talk about economics and law. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I hope to interact with you in the future.
Thanks. It was great to be on today.
All right. Thanks, David, and thanks, Vojtěch.
Thank you very much for having us.
All right. Bye-bye.